In the remote uplands of Central Africa, this monument marks a beginning. With these drops of water, the River Nile begins its 4,000-mile journey northward to the Mediterranean, crossing half a continent and 7,000 years of recorded human history. On its banks, civilization built early marvels. Kingdoms rose and fell, gods appeared and vanished. Their destinies inseparably joined to the river. None were masters of it. More than ever dependent on the life stream of the Nile, man still tries to impose his rule. To learn the impact of his growing intrusion, Cousteau team members study the changes now occurring in the Earth's longest river. Transported by the Expedition's specially fitted PBY Catalina, the team members will follow the entire course of the Nile in their 10-month journey and counter the endlessly various life still sustained by the river. Some of it little altered since prehistoric times. Always, in its passage across a changing landscape and the shifting patterns of life upon it, the river went its own way. Man's early devices had little effect upon it. Now, increasingly, man's machines have the power to alter the Nile forever. Not only are ancient cultures and animal sanctuaries threatened by extinction, but men are learning that technological triumphs sometimes create problems greater than the ones they seek to solve. On the Nile, man has preserved some of his noblest monuments. Today, it is the river itself that may be most in need of his protection. Travelers upon and beneath the seas, Philippe and Jacques Cousteau this time take to the air. Their first destination, the mountain headwaters of the Nile. As the Catalina climbs above the waters off Corsica, the Cousteaus leave behind the Calypso in which they have been charting the Mediterranean's increasing pollution. Now they will study the greatest of its river systems, the Nile, which once emptied as much as 84 billion cubic meters of water into the inland sea each year. Flying southward, the Cousteau's path will cross the waterless Sahara to the ruined Zori Range, once called the Mountains of the Moon. Part of Africa's great central rift, it forms a vast escarpment, sometimes rising 16,000 feet into the equatorial sky, close to the Catalina's operational ceiling. Here in midair hangs the true source of the Nile, the moisture-laden clouds moving eastward from the Atlantic that make the ruined Zori Mountains one of the wettest regions on Earth. and for the Catalina, threading its way among the peaks, one of the most hazardous. Trapped by the snow-capped summits of the Great Barrier, cooled by the upper altitudes, the clouds release their rain on the mountain slopes, running off through wild upland streams into the great catch basins of Lake Albert and Lake Victoria, major reservoir from which the upper White Nile flows. Descending through the broken overcast, the travelers at last glimpse the swift current of the upper Nile. Here, still nearly as unspoiled as it was at its discovery, more than a century ago. As Captain Cousteau traces their course upstream through Uganda, Philippe brings the Catalina low over the clustered Sesse Islands in the northern end of Lake Victoria, only a few miles from the airport of Entebbe. It is here that the Cousteaus first sight a strange phenomenon. Clusters of wraith-like columns rising from the surface of the lake.
Okay, let's go down lower.
Suspecting that they may be water spouts or even dust twisters carried out over the lake, Philippe approaches cautiously. Even flying at an altitude of 300 feet, the swaying columns tower to double that height above the plain.
Gros nuage d'oiseaux au-dessus. Ils sont en train de se former en colonne pour, comme d'habitude. Répète. J'ai pas entendu. Ils sont en train de se former en colonne. Oui.
It is only when the Catalina is brought to the edge of one of the whirling clouds that the Cousteaus at last realize the character of the mysterious colonnades.
On commence à plus voir grand-chose.
They are lake flies, veritable storms of insect life rising from the water.
Il y a peut-être intérêt à s'éloigner un petit peu et à revenir parce que les oiseaux se méfient.
Now a challenge appears. Like a great aerial armada, a phalanx of birds sweeps in to attack. Abruptly, the men aboard the Catalina are witnesses to an onslaught of predators by which nature balances accounts between one species and another.
Essaie de t'approcher un peu des oiseaux. Ah, ils sont tous au-dessus, hein, les oiseaux. Close.
Eager to follow the course of this one-sided action, Philippe brings the Catalina in to a landing. Ahead of them, the dark clouds of insects are moving westward across the islands. Swept by the wind away from their natural breeding bed in the lake itself, the numbers of flies are so vast that no attrition halts their survival. Even the cumulative sound of their tiny wings is like a storm. With only 6 to 12 hours of life after rising to the surface of the lake, the flies have but a single purpose: to mate before they die. Their entire development, designed for a few climactic hours, the flies spread their wings in mating flight. Then, spent, they fall again to the surface of the lake, where the voracious tilapia and other fish await them. Today, near Jinja, a series of watery stairways mark the point where in 1862, a young British colonial officer, John Hanning Speke, first sighted Ripon Falls and determined that Lake Victoria was the major source of the Nile. Though disputed long after his accidental death, his discovery remains secure. But the Ripon Falls are all but drowned by the dam, which now regulates the flow from the lake. Landing in quieter waters downstream from Lake Victoria, the airborne travelers make rendezvous with members of the overland team. Leaving the Catalina at anchor, the Cousteau set out by caravan across Uganda's primitive backcountry, still alive with one of the world's last great assemblies of wild animals.
Year by year, with growing haste, Africa strides out of an ancient world into the present. Still, as we move through these open savannas, I feel myself almost a stranger, a tourist in another time. Most of us who have been brought up in the so-called developed countries have seen these animals only in zoos. Here, in their native habitat, I feel that I am returning to some storybook period in the history of life, visiting the images of a childhood we ourselves no longer remember. For these animals, these infinitely varied inventions of nature, still convey to us a sense of the miraculous. In a world that encourages uniformity, that judges values by their utility, perhaps these animals, like so many of their kind, also are doomed to disappear in favor of some more commercially useful species. Yet I cannot avoid a bitter sense of loss that we, born to a world that still held these creatures, are being robbed of a priceless inheritance. A life that welcomes diversity, not sameness, that treasures astonishment and wonder instead of boredom.
Deadly huntress, the lioness does not always make her kill. In the bush, even the vehicles falter. The good-natured local inhabitants sometimes wind up pushing them. Led by Philippe, the team moves on. With Dominique Soumian and the camera crew, he leaves the Catalina to search for the island refuge of a creature whose numbers constitute 1/5 of all living mammal species, the bat. Protected by the river's torrent from natives who eat them, a great colony of the flying mammals here festoons the branches of the trees. hanging in untidy clusters, awaiting nightfall, the fox-faced bats stir uneasily, quick to quarrel. At last, as twilight approaches, the bat population comes to light. A fruit-eating species, they will spend the night foraging for bananas, mangoes, pineapples, and other fruits, sometimes threatening the crops of farmers and commercial growers. Near daybreak, with an unsteady rush of wings, the bats return. Glutted, they gather once more upon the branches, sometimes bend them down almost to breaking. As the night foragers hang in sleep, other hunters awaken in the dawn. Across the still waters, Ugandan fishermen strike the surface, trying to frighten the fish into their nets. Near shore waits the patient shadow of another formidable hunter, the marabou stork. Aboard the Catalina also, life begins to stir. Atop the waist of the craft, protected by netting against the attack of insects, Dominique has found a cool and private berth, safely aloof from the mundane chores below. As a standard precaution against parasitic organisms endemic in some sections of the Nile Basin, the water is carefully filtered and boiled. Otherwise, Philippe and his companions might be breakfasting in the dining room of a well-staffed hotel.
Rice.
Across the surface of the lake, a string of pelicans also arrives to consider the day's menu. Oblivious both to the team's rubber raft and to the hippos lazing in the lake, the pelicans are perfectly mannered guests, catching their fish in flawless unison.
To the tiny islands that dot the lake come other visitors. The shores of the lake are occupied by permanent residents, often hostile to intruders. But here, in clustered shelters of papyrus reeds, the rejected Karamoja from the harsh lands to the northeast come to find seasonal refuge and food, squatters on the lake itself. Approaching one of the temporary guests, I find that the visitor also speaks English, now a common language in a nation of many diverse dialects.
You fisherman here?
Yes, I'm a fisherman.
What do you catch?
I fish these tilapias.
Tilapia?
Are you from French?
Yes.
How is it French? Quite all right?
Hmm?
Is it French all right?
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
Very much.
Have you come to catch fish?
No, we come to visit.
Oh.
You have a boat?
Yes, I have a boat. I have gone back down there.
Oh, I see. From another fisherman, I hear the reasons that bring so many of the Karamoja to the islands for nearly half of each year.
He's pottering us.
Hmm?
This man. Is he pottering us?
Is he what?
Pottering. Taking our pictures.
Yes. Are you from here, from this region?
No, I'm from Central Karamoja there.
Central Karamoja?
Yes.
How is it there?
There is all right anyway. And
Is it-
cultivation
Is
type
there,
of the
is
well.
there a lot of water there?
Water?
You have
No.
streams, rivers?
No. Sort of just
Desert?
nothing.
Nothing.
There is no like even rivers.
No?
Yes.
Is that why you
We
come?
just depend on bore wells only.
Oh.
Yes.
Is that why you come here?
Yes.
For the water?
For the water and for fish also. Because we are lacking meat.
I see. How long have you been here?
We have taken about 5 months.
5 months?
Yes.
You go back to Karamoja?
We shall have to go back for just a room, then we come back.
Where do you like it best, here or over there?
No, here.
Why don't you stay here?
Yeah, we stay here because we have now plenty of meat here. Everything I get, plenty. Yes.
Dried or smoked upon the racks by the exultant tribesmen, vast quantities of tilapia and other fish are prepared for use either for food or as barter for other goods in leaner months to come.
I went to Nakongo. Konkane file bizungu byari. Mana ati anukira wote.
The purpose of working is money.
Like distant children far from home, they return to the river in times of trouble. To each, the Nile is mother, protector, food and water, survival. Here, even the great marabou stork, which can kill a flamingo with a single blow of its heavy bill, comes in hope of an easy meal.
Now tranquility is left behind. In swift descent, the river rushes northward in a succession of wild rapids. Followed on its course by the Cousteaus in the Catalina, the Nile plunges through one of the most spectacular events in its 4,000-mile journey, the Murchison Falls, discovered in 1864 by an aristocratic English sportsman and his indomitable wife, Samuel and Florence Baker. In a low-level run that brings a moment of silent tension aboard the aircraft, Philippe dares the treacherous downdrafts above the falls for a closer view. With only minor damage to the nose, the Catalina is brought to a safe landing in calmer waters below the falls. Then in the rubber boats, the Cousteaus return upstream against the heavy 6-knot current. Maneuvering their craft with difficulty through a turmoil of spray and heaving waters, they manage at last to approach the base of the falls. There, pressed through a rocky gap barely 20 feet wide, the entire volume of the Victoria Nile seems to explode with volcanic force. Released from tension, the Nile moves on more calmly through a broadening valley. Here again, in its passage through marsh and meadow, uncounted species take their life from the river. A basking crocodile, a flight of African skimmers, an elephant with her infant progeny. But on each species, nature has struck a balance, set a limitation. Elephant numbers are kept in check by loss of forage. Against zebra, gazelle, or antelope, nature has set lion and leopard to eat their fill. Against the armored crocodile, she has sent more devious foes, predators to rob the nest. Surprisingly agile, this female crocodile has climbed the steep bank to make her nest, burying her eggs in the sandy soil high above the rush of the river. But many a nest does not survive, pillaged by relentless predators such as the monitor lizard. Interrupted at his feeding, the monitor flees the members of the Cousteau team, leaving behind a debris of broken shells. But among them, one small, prematurely exposed crocodile survives.
Il bouge, regarde. On va le mettre à l'eau. Hein.
Faut le mettre à l'eau.
Faut le mettre à l'eau parce qu'il ne va pas vivre.
Faut le mettre là. Quick. Fais gaffe à la mer parce que je vais pas avoir la... Pas trop tout de suite. Laisse-le un peu au bord, qu'il s'habitue à l'eau.
Bon, ouais.
Placed in the river by its rescuers, the little reptile swims off to continue a life so rudely begun.
Ça va aller là, va aller là.
Silently watching the rescue, the maternal crocodile fulfills some dim guardian role. But it is doubtful that she ever will recognize her offspring again. Later, Philippe and his companions move unchallenged among the herds of hippopotami. Ordinarily peaceful when left alone, they are not always as docile as they appear. Yearly, they take a higher toll of human life than do either lions or elephants. Especially bad-tempered during mating season, bulls sometimes kill rivals with slashing attacks of their huge teeth, a fatal result generally rare among members of the same wild species. Often as heavy as 2 tons, ungainly on feet too small for their bulk, the hippos nonetheless leave the water at night, sometimes walk for several miles to graze and consume as much as 400 pounds of grass before returning to the river.